Okay, we are going to talk about pedigrees, and we're going to do some analysis. That'll be followed up by a quiz. So I'm just going to put the date up here, 4/24, and then we'll erase it when we're all done. So get that pedigree copied, and then we'll start to talk. Okay, we missed a bunch of conversation there. Whoops. But yes, we are going to guess that this is sex-linked because we see that only males are affected, and it's definitely recessive because we have offspring who are affected where parents aren't. So if we shrink this down a little bit, let's assign some alleles, okay? So we'll move that over to there. Let's assign alleles. So we know this is on the X chromosome, and we'll just say that we have XN, which would be a normal X, and we have X little n, which would be the allele for whatever the condition is. You know. Well, I'll tell you what. We'll name one of the X-linked disorders. This could be color blindness. And this would be normal vision. But this could be any of a number of X-linked disorders, and there are three X-linked disorders on the packets that you're going to get that you'll be working with. Okay, so what is this guy's genotype? X little n y. So he is X little n y. How do we know that? We know he's affected and he's a boy, so he only has one copy of an X. He's biologically male. And we know that since he's affected with this, he must have that colorblind X. Okay. Well, so what do we know about this guy? What do we know about this guy right here? What do you know about him? What's his genotype? Same, X little n y. Same as his grandpa. If you are a colorblind male, the odds are pretty good that if you go back and talk to your mom's dad, your maternal grandfather, he's probably colorblind too. There's a chance he's not. There are other ways that can be inherited through your mother, but that's one of the real strong possibilities. What about this guy? This guy in the fourth generation. Same genotype, X little n y. So same as his uncle and same as his great-grandpa. And if he's somebody who is, old enough to have a conversation with his great-grandpa and his great-grandpa's still alive, how many of you still have great-grandparents? Excellent. Talk to them. They're a rich source of information. If they're still in a condition to talk and tell stories, man, that's good stuff. So yeah, if this guy's lucky enough that his great-grandpa's still alive, he's got the same condition as his uncle and his great-grandpa. Okay. Now, and I'm going to highlight this guy in red. So we're talking about this guy here. Where did he get his Y chromosome? From his dad. He got his Y chromosome from his dad. Where did he get that XN? From his mama. Okay. Well, where did his mother? So what's his mother's genotype? She's X big N, X little n. How do we know that? She's not affected, so we know she doesn't have two copies of the X little n. But we know that she passed on an X little n to her son. So we know for sure she's a carrier. So where did she get her X big N? Where did she get her X big N? This is the toughest question we've asked so far. Okay, well let's ask where she got what we'll call the defective X. Where did she get the X little n? Which side of her family did that colorblind gene come down through? Her mom. She got that from her mom. So we know that her mom's genotype is what? X big N, X little n. Where did her mom get that X little n? From her dad. So this person here has that color blindness gene that we can trace back to her grandfather, who was colorblind. Okay? Now, I've told you my husband's colorblind, and one of the first times I met his mom, I did a pedigree for her because I'm that kind of geek. I'm not sure she was real impressed with that. I think she was just kind of confused and wanted me to stop. But I said, so was your dad colorblind? Did you know that your dad was colorblind? Because I wasn't thinking about this possibility. And she said, no, I don't think my dad was colorblind. And I went, oh. So she may have inherited that color blindness gene from her mom. So she could have a long string of male ancestors who aren't colorblind. You know, she could have, that could have been passed on. It's a 50-50 chance for a female who's a carrier that her daughters will be carriers. So we can trace this one gene, this, from this person to this person to this person. We can trace it through a family that way. And we can see where it pops up. Okay, let's look at a slightly different... How do you feel about sex-linked traits? On a scale of 0 to 5, 0 is, I don't know who you are, what's my name? 5 is, I'm pretty confident, I think I could analyze a pedigree for a sex-linked trait. Lots of 4s and 5s. You're allowed to say 0. You can hide your 0 if you want. You're allowed to say 1. Like, oh. Okay. But you have to give me a number. I'm going to interpret no number as a 0, and you'll be singled out for special attention. Okay. All right. So I have lots of 4s and 5s. I have 2s and 3s. That's fine. Let's look at a slightly different scenario. Okay, we have a new pedigree here. So I'll let you get that copied, and then we'll start to analyze it. Here's another pedigree. What do you notice immediately? So raise your hand, don't yell it out. Tell me everything you notice about this. It's another 4 generation. Go ahead. Pardon? Okay. Other things you notice? It doesn't look to be sex-linked. Why not? Yeah, we've got lots of males and lots of females who are affected. It doesn't seem to be discriminating based on sex. So I would not think this is X-linked. What else, Zach?
There's no carriers.
How do you know that? Who's all affected? Everybody on the pedigree?
No. If you have it,
Mm-hmm. Ah, so we don't see any case where a child has it and their parent doesn't. We don't see any affected offspring whose parents did not have the trait. What does that tell us, Ben? This is a dominant trait. You said it. Sorry. This is a dominant trait. Okay, well, I'll give Nick credit for having known that. I think a lot of you probably had clicked that. So yeah, this is a dominant trait. This is something where if you have this condition, so do your offspring. My bent pinky fingers, my weird-looking, mutated, summer squash, crooked little, funny-looking pinky fingers fall into this category. My dad had them, I have them, my daughter has them. We all have weird, mutated, I could never be a hand model. That career path was closed for me. Sadly. It wasn't really on my list anyway. But yeah, this is a dominant trait. This could be widow's peak. Okay, widow's peak is dominant. Those of you who have a widow's peak, if you know your biological parents, go home and make them do that. If you don't, should you reproduce? One of the first things you'll want to, well, no, okay, you'll want to just look at your baby in awe. But one of the things you'll want to look at, you know, after the awe wears off is like, oh my gosh, the kid's got a widow's peak. Well, of course they do if you do. So, this is clearly a dominant trait. Now, knowing that, can we figure out, let's start off with these people down here, this 4th generation pair of siblings, this brother and sister. Can we figure out their genotype? So we'll use big N, little n, you know. So affected and not. Can we figure out their genotype? We can. Okay. What do you think their genotype is? Big N, big N. So we have one vote for big N, big N. Anybody vote against big N, big N? Why, Nick?
Because the other one's not affected, the mother.
Ah! So if they were big N, let's think this through. Where would they have gotten one of those big N's? From their dad, who's affected. Okay, they could get a big N from their dad who's affected. But where would that other big N have had to come from? Their mom. Mom's not affected. What's mom's genotype? It's got to be little n, because if she had a single allele for this, she would be affected. So we know that these guys can't be big N, big N. What do they have to be? They have to be big N, little n, because they had to have gotten a copy of that small n from their mother. So as long as we have as long as we've got a parent who's unaffected with a dominant trait, the offspring are going to be, what do we call that?
Heterozygous.
They're going to be heterozygous, yeah. Now, so for every single one of, we can figure out this one and this one and this one and this one, because we know what both parents are. We know here that we have an affected parent, we have an unaffected parent. So these guys are all heterozygous. Who on here is affected and we cannot figure out their genotype? There's one individual on here, first generation. Grandma up here, or great-grandma, depending on who's doing the talking. We have no idea about her parents, okay? We have no clue about her parents. So we don't know if she's big N, or big N, little n. We have no idea, okay? Now, when you get your genetic counseling projects, you are going to have some couples for whom, I know I've got at least one individual in there where it says, no family history available, biological parents unknown. That happens. There are people who are adopted and they don't have any information about their biological families. In some cases, when people are placed for adoption, they do get a file. And I know of individuals who have received a very basic file that often just one biological parent has filled out saying, family history of this, family history of that, and typically only if there's something really serious. But there is a level of uncertainty with that. So they don't get a lot of biological information. There are also cases where it's not that they were placed for adoption, it's not that they didn't know their biological parent, but if their biological parent died early. So my father-in-law's dad died when he was like 6 years old. He doesn't really know his dad's family. So he doesn't really have a lot of information about them. He knew his dad. He was raised by his dad until his dad died. But he just doesn't have, at 6 you don't have real serious conversations with your parent about family history. You just don't. So there's a real lack of information there. So you can have a situation like that. There are also people for whom records were lost. If you have for you guys, I'm guessing it would most commonly be grandparents or great-grandparents who were immigrants. So most of you looking around have ancestors who came from probably Europe, just statistically speaking and looking at the lot of you. Now you could also have ancestors who were Native American who've been on this continent. You could have ancestors who were African American or who were from Africa. You could have Asian or Pacific Islander ancestors. But looking around, I would say most of you have at least most of your ancestors coming from Europe. If those people came over a generation or two ago, and especially some people came over very young, their records stayed in that home country and they just don't have a lot. There are families who put 16-year-olds on boats. 15, 17, and 19-year-old on the boat, go. There's more opportunity for you there. And there's a disconnect. They don't get a lot of information about past generations then. There's sort of a cutoff. African. So some of the disorders that you're going to look at have ethnically related links. So Tay-Sachs is one. It's not in the genetic profiles you're going to get, but it's one that we did a problem on in class on your quiz. That is one that is strongly linked to people of what's called Ashkenazi Jewish descent. So Ashkenazi Jews are Eastern European Jews. So if you had ancestors who were Polish Jews, if you had ancestors who were Hungarian Jews, and a lot of those people, of course, fled Europe when? World War II. Yeah, in the 40s. If they survived, a lot of them fled. The people who have Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry have much higher incidences of Tay-Sachs disease, and there's also a Braca gene mutation that we'll talk about later. And that's another one. Actually, I should add Braca genes to this. I should add Braca gene mutations to the genetic counseling. But we'll talk about BRCAs when we talk about DNA. It's the breast cancer gene. So, you know, among people of some ethnic backgrounds, there's a higher rate of particular diseases. If you don't know what your ethnic background is, you don't know if you have an additional risk. So, okay. Questions, comments, concerns on pedigrees? Do you feel like you can pretty well label a genotype from a pedigree? Do you want to try one more recessive together? You want to try a not sex-linked recessive? Yes? Okay, let's do that. Okay, so we've got a new pedigree to talk about. I'll let you guys finish copying and then we'll start to analyze. I'm going to move it up a little bit. We will pick up after lunch. Here, we'll go on and we'll talk a little bit about Braca mutation. So Braca, B-R-A-C 1 and B-R-A-C 2. These are two genes that there's a test for. There's a fairly easy, it's not cheap, but it's an easy test for. The Braca genes are often called the breast cancer genes, and I forget what the BRAC stands for, but the basics are they're considered breast cancer genes. And for women with a given mutation, for women who have basically the affected version of BRCA1, they have a 90% lifetime chance of developing breast cancer. And this is aggressive breast cancer. For women who have the BRCA1 gene, it's something like a 75 or 80% chance of developing ovarian cancer, which is also fairly aggressive and kills pretty quickly. There are women, and apparently Angelina Jolie is one of them, who have, I mean, like when you look at their family history, like every female member of their family is deceased or a cancer survivor, and it's all breast and ovarian. You know, women who have lost their grandmother, their mother, all their maternal aunts, their sister, you know, all these women in their family have had breast cancer. And those are the women who you typically say, let's get you tested, dear. You know, because with a family history like that. Now, there are women, breast cancer can pop up spontaneously. It can be a random mutation. It can be a result of chemical exposure. There are lots of things that cause cancer. You know, unfortunately, we live in a cancer cluster here. I don't know if you're aware of that, but we have higher than the national average rate of cancer cases. And I've lost a number of people I love to cancer. But the Braca stuff is separate from any environmental influence. It is completely separate from any environmental influence. It is in your genes. If you're born with the Braca mutation, the die is cast for you. Now, 10% of women who have that BRCA1 mutation don't go on to develop cancer. 10%. There's a really powerful, and I don't think I can show it in here because it's very much made for adults, and I would encourage any of you to watch it on your own, but I don't think I can reasonably show it. Really powerful documentary made by a woman who, you know, had a very strong family history of breast cancer and got herself tested and found that she was positive for Braca. She had a Braca mutation. And the genetic counselor asked her the following questions. Do you want to have kids? And she said, well, yeah, I always planned on it. You know, I thought I'd finish college, you know, find the right person, get into my career, you know. maybe wait till my mid-30s. And the counselor looked at her and said, if you want to have children, I would advise that you do it in the next few years, and then I would advise that you have a hysterectomy. So she's like 22 years old. She's thinking, yeah, maybe she'll have kids in 10 years. And the genetic counselor's telling her, if you would like to have children, you should do it as soon as possible, and then you should get that stuff out. Period. Because it could kill you. And the genetic counselor is also telling her, many women in your situation would have a preventive double mastectomy, having both breasts removed preventively before you have cancer. Whoa! It's a lot to absorb. So that's the kind of thing that people with a Braca mutation are facing. And actually, I probably should include a Braca mutation on the genetic counseling sheet. This is not a case where you're looking at... Can you close that door, Nick? You're not looking necessarily at people who already have a condition. You're looking at the risk of passing on the genes. So this woman's mother knew that she had passed this Braca mutation on, and I think this woman had 2 sisters. So her mother had had 3 daughters. And her mother was struggling with the idea that she passed on this potentially lethal mutation to her children. That something that came from her genes could kill her daughters. And all 3 girls ended up getting tested. 2 of the sisters did not have the mutation, because it was a 50-50 shot of whether they would get it or not. 2 of the girls did not have the mutation. So the one sister who did was the one who was struggling with, do I have a double mastectomy and do I have a hysterectomy at 25? Whoa. So that's Angelina Jolie, has a very strong family history, and she just had a preventive, I know she had a preventive hysterectomy. I don't know, I think she had the